Obviously, slightly different setup. It's time to look back at Matchday 28. So there was no games on Friday because it was Good Friday, and in Germany there's laws against sports happening on a Friday. So there were no games and at all. There was no sporting event at all on Friday. So it meant there were a lot of games on Saturday. And again, as most things in the Bundesliga now, the relegation fight is more or less the only thing worth paying attention to. And obviously the key team in this relegation fight is Wolfsburg. And they were playing against Bayer Leverkusen, and this ended 6-3. Yeah. This was actually one of Wolfsburg's better performances this season, or initially it was. They were 3-1 up. And then they just more or less collapsed. And I think it just kind of shows that they are getting relegated as much as they want to. I just think a performance like this where you're leading, if like you're a serious team, then you would be serious about potentially getting relegated and do something. But they didn't. And as I said before, time's running out for Wolfsburg. Day by day, the game week by game week, the less likely they are to pick up points, or the fact they're not picking up points, the less likely they are to close the gap. And we'll get to it later, the fact that the teams around them are also picking up points is not really beneficial to their cause, and it looks increasingly likely that they will be going down. But for Leverkusen, it's a bit of a red flag that they conceded 6 goals in the past 2 games, and those past 2 games have been against the bottom 2. Now, obviously, the fact that they managed, especially in this game, they were able to fight back and come from behind and close the deficit is obviously a positive. But again, there's been a lot to talk about the future of Kasper Højlund, and I think that's partially justified because Højlund hasn't been the best at certain points this season. Obviously, at the beginning he was really good, but in recent weeks, Leverkusen have kind of stuttered, and it makes you think, is he the right man to take this team forward? Is he the right man to lead them to where they want to be? And that is potentially challenging for the Bundesliga once again. Obviously, this is a season of transition, so whoever the manager was, it was always going to be a difficult season. But sometimes, again, like we've seen in the past, you just need like a season with a transitional manager. And Højlund could be that person. Granted, he could still win the Pokal. So I think it's just more or less wait and see with the Leverkusen season. And depending what happens with him, or with that season, will depend what happens with Højlund. Because obviously they're also currently 6th, and so wouldn't qualify for the Champions League either, which is a bit of a major problem for Leverkusen, especially with all the money they've invested in recent. The top of the table clash with Bayern versus Freiburg. Freiburg actually had a 2-goal lead in this game. And as that stood, it meant that potentially, if Borussia Dortmund won later on, they could close the gap to 6 points. Title race? Who knows? I doubt it, because there was only like 6 games left, so it's not going to happen. But it was irrelevant anyway, because Tom Bischoff had a long-range effort which went in, and that cut the deficit to 1, and then he scored more or less an identical second goal to level it, and then Lennart Karl scored the winner. Harry Kane was absent from this game with an injury he picked up on the international break. I don't think he's going to break the record now. I think with the trajectory that he was on before, he had like these small minor injuries. Okay, fair enough. But in the past few weeks, I don't think it's enough now to break the Robert Lewandowski record, at least for this season. But one record that will potentially be broken is the 101 goal record. Bayern are now on 100 goals. So it's all they need to do is score twice. And I think that's going to potentially may happen. And then they have set the new record. The previous record was set in the 70s, and that was actually the season that Gerd Müller scored 40 goals a season and set that initial record. Obviously, Bayern's focus now is on midweek, where they play, both of the teams actually will be focused on midweek, because Bayern play Real Madrid and Freiburg play Celta Vigo. Obviously, in the context of the coefficient, this will be an important one for Germany, because they're second or the third in the race for the extra Champions League place, and they're behind Spain. So if you get the wins, that will be beneficial, as well as knocking out the Spanish teams. That will also be beneficial. Then in the race for the Champions League, Mainz beat Hoffenheim 2-1. So that means they've only lost twice now under Urs Fischer. But for Hoffenheim, I think it's quite easily a case of they're stuttering now. They're running out of energy. They play quite a high intense style of play, and they're just running out of energy. They're getting tired, and it's more or less fading away. And they're slowly slipping away with Europe, while you've got the teams around them like Leipzig, and to an extent Leverkusen, who are closing in, winning. Leipzig beat Bremen 2-1. A loss obviously was not ideal for Bremen, but considering other results, you may take it. I'm mainly looking at Wolfsburg. And they probably did deserve at least a point from this game. But again, as I've said, I think they should be all right. Well, Leipzig, they move up to 4th in the Ole Werner derby. Elsewhere on the Saturday, Borussia Mönchengladbach drew 2-2 with Heidenheim. Gladbach were outplayed by last place, which tells you everything you need to know. I said in a previous video that I think Polanski could potentially go in the summer. I think there's valid reasoning for getting rid of him, and I think that was kind of proven on that day. I think Gladbach were obviously a bit too defensive for a home game against a team fighting relegation. I mean, that should tell you everything, really. Well, Heidenheim, they're obviously putting in a decent run at the moment. It's as if they smell blood with Wolfsburg and stuff, and they realise, oh, actually, maybe we can stay up. I mean, they drew with Gladbach, they drew with Leverkusen. I think they won a game recently too. And so now, Heidenheim, I'm pretty sure the gap is still pretty sizable. So they're not going to be able to close it on Wolfsburg. I mean, the gap is still 5 points, and they're 11 points from safety. They're 10 points from the relegation playoff. I think they're just trying to not finish last. With the way Wolfsburg are going, it's probably entirely possible. And then the other Saturday game, again, finished a draw. It was Hamburg 1-1 with Augsburg. There's not really a lot to say about this game. But on the Saturday afternoon or evening game, there is a lot to say. So it was between Stuttgart and Dortmund, obviously a big clash, second versus third. Stuttgart could actually have closed the gap on Dortmund and put pressure on them for a sneaky second place finish again. From this game, one team decided to play football. The other was Borussia Dortmund. What this did show is Stuttgart still probably a bit of a way off, challenging for the title and stuff. Again, I still think they will do in the future, but they do need to be more clinical. As this was shown, as they were completely dominant for 92 minutes of the game and should have been leading. And then Borussia Dortmund scored through Karim Adeyemi, and then Julian Brandt made it 2-0 because Dortmund scored on a counter when Stuttgart were pushing for an equaliser. And ultimately, this was really undeserved for Dortmund. Again, your season's over. You should, I'll be honest, you're more or less guaranteed second. So you might as well start, experimenting with how you play, and maybe be a bit more adventurous and not just sit back and defend. I'm granted, I'm aware it's a home game, but you're playing as if there's something on the line, but there's nothing on the line to play for. If that makes sense. So Dortmund are playing quite cowardly for a team that they've nothing to play for, and the whole why? And so it was undeserved, and it was a really tough watch because Dortmund made it a tough watch. And obviously there's the main talk around Dortmund now is the stuff that's going on off the pitch. So they sacked Sebastian Kehl, and then they've replaced him with Niels Ole Buch. Then there's a whole palaver surrounding Nico Schlotterbeck and his contract and what happens with that. And that's where all the main talk is. Again, for Dortmund, it doesn't really matter because there's fuck all those to play for. But I think this is, for Stuttgart, a learning curve. Obviously, they're still a relatively young team and they're still learning about what it takes to challenge at the top, and this will be another learning curve. Then on Sunday, Union Berlin, I'll actually combine the two. Union Berlin drew 1-1 with St. Pauli, while Frankfurt drew 2-2 with Cologne. Cologne came from behind to draw 2-2. They were 2-0 down, but they managed to come from behind and rescue a point, and at the end of the day, that was an important point for Cologne. Considering that St. Pauli, literally in the game beforehand, had levelled on points with them, they needed to get something from this game. And ultimately, they got a point, and so that means they extended their gap on Heidenheim or on St. Pauli to a point again, while they both extended their advantage over Wolfsburg. So Wolfsburg are on 21 points now, St. Pauli on 25, and Cologne on 27. As I said in the previous video, I think this is more or less how it's going to end. I think St. Pauli won't have enough in them to fight for the promotion place, or to get. They won't have enough in them to get out of the relegation playoff. And I think with the likes of Cologne and Bremen, I think they'll just do enough to get there, get over the line. So yeah, as I said on the table, Heidenheim are 18th on 16, Wolfsburg are 17th on 21 points, St. Pauli is 16th on 25, Cologne are 15th on 27, Werder Bremen are 14th on 28, Borussia Mönchengladbach are 13th on 30, but I think they're borderline safe. And then obviously at the top, Bayern are first, Dortmund are second, Stuttgart or Leipzig are actually now third, as they've moved level on points with Stuttgart. Hoffenheim are fifth, 3 points up behind them, while 1 point behind them is Bayer Leverkusen. So next week, the standout game is Borussia Dortmund versus Bayer Leverkusen, and then you have the likes of Bayer, when it comes to relegation teams, Wolfsburg play Frankfurt, another difficult game for them. St. Pauli play Bayern, Cologne play Bremen at a relegation 6-pointer, Stuttgart play Hamburg, while that's it. Really, and they're the standout games. Obviously, this is going to be a slightly smaller or shorter video. As you can tell, that the background is different, and the background will probably be different again next week. But yeah, let me know what you think about this match day, and anything that went on, anyone that interested you, or just anything really.